Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. If you have a minute, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Thanks, and we appreciate your support. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. My name is John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Today, our guest is Lauren Roberts. Lauren is a director at Greenlight Television, which is a company that specializes in filming sports, events, and making award-winning documentaries. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the origin story. How did you get your start in the industry?
Well, I studied languages at university, and when I'd finished my degree course, I knew I didn't want to be a teacher, and I was deciding what did I want to do, and I got a summer job at a video distribution company called Duke Video, and I started there as a sales executive, so basically selling and the rights to the videos, and I didn't even know such an industry existed when I started in doing that. So I started off doing distribution and trying to get broadcasters all over the world to acquire their shows, and some of the shows for Duke Video were produced by a company called Greenlight Television, and a few years into my work at Duke, they advertised for a sales executive, and it seemed like a good time to fit, and I was really interested by this time in the TV industry and in how all the programs that I was selling, how were they made. So going over to more of a production company that needed a salesperson was really attractive to me. So yeah, I applied for the job at Greenlight and happily got it, and I'm still here 15, 16 years later.
So let's learn more about Greenlight Television. Tell us about the company.
Well, Greenlight was founded in 1994. There was three original founders of the company, and they were all working in motorsports production all over the world, but for a company based in the Isle of Man, actually, which is a small island in the United Kingdom. And they left the various people they were working for example, Dorna, who handle all the rights for the Moto Grand Prix, and they started their own company, and their first event was the Macau Grand Prix in 1994 in November. Macau is out near Hong Kong, if anyone doesn't know that, and started working for various different clients, all in the motorsport area. So, for example, they worked a lot in Formula One for Marlboro. So we had an edit suite out at the Ferrari factory in Italy for many, many years. But obviously, as cigarette advertising became less and less possible in motorsports, we moved into other areas, and we've always worked for lots of different clients, whether it's broadcasters, for example, the BBC. We produce the coverage of the biggest sporting event in Northern Ireland, which is a motorbike race called the Northwest 200, and we do that for them live around a 10-mile circuit. Or sometimes we work for the championship or the series holder. So that might be, for example, here in the US, we cover the Trans Am series, and we work for the Trans Am series directly, and we produce and then distribute for them. So Greenlight has always had the mission of just producing what we like to think of as very high-level productions, but not at Hollywood prices. And we always under-promise and over-deliver. And it's always been Greenlight's philosophy, which is slightly different to perhaps some other production companies, that we like to invest in people. So rather than having a lot of freelancers per project, we have quite a number of full-time staff. So we have 25 in all across our different offices, and we like to have the staff full-time because we feel they then know and understand the way we work, and especially when we're working on sports, which is very fast turnaround type events where you really need to be on site and be very efficient and know what you're doing, especially when producing them ENG, which is quite unusual in the US. Most sports are produced live, but it's for some of our clients it's more cost effective for us to produce ENG. And then the other side of the business is that we've tried to expand out our documentary. We didn't want to just be pigeonholed in motorsports, so we've done cycling, we've done taekwondo, we've done football, rugby, all kinds of different sports. We actually covered the Commonwealth Youth Games that took place in the Isle of Man a few years ago. But the other side of the business is documentary and factual programming, which we work hard on and constantly coming up with new ideas for and trying to get commissions for, which is why I was at Real Screen the other week. So it's quite a multifaceted business, but we all enjoy our work.
So I introduced you as a director. Talk a little bit about what your role is and what a typical day is for you.
Yes, you did introduce me as a director, and although, legally I'm a director of the company, nobody at Greenlight has one job. We're all multitaskers. All our cameramen are also editors. All our editors can go out and shoot. We've got graphics people that work for us. Everybody has a dual role. So although I started out in sales, gradually I got kind of sucked into, voluntarily I might say, into more and more production. And so a typical day, there isn't a typical day for me, because some days I'm in the office trying to get the next idea off the ground, and other days I'm in the field running around with a clipboard producing a sporting event or our latest documentary.
It's obvious, without me even saying this, but Greenlight Television is truly a global company with offices all over the world. Where are you guys specifically located?
The headquarters is in the Isle of Man, as I mentioned before, and our biggest event over there is a big, huge motorcycle event called the Isle of Man TT, and that's over a 37-mile course, so it's quite a challenge to produce that and turn around races, ENG, to go on air the same night. We make shows within 4 hours of the race happening. So that's where our headquarters is. Then in 2011, I left the Isle of Man and moved to Manchester, and we opened an office there, which is in a place called Media City, where they were trying to make a kind of media hub outside of London in the UK. So I ran the Media City office for a few years, and then in 2015, although we've always worked globally, we've done a lot of work in America over the years, we'd never got a full-time office here, but in 2015 we had the opportunity to establish one through our work with a couple of our clients, Powerboat P1, and also a motorbike series that was relaunching out here called Moto America. And so in 2015 we founded Greenlight USA.
And for the purposes of this podcast, I want to focus a little bit on your Tampa office. So what brought you to Florida specifically?
As I mentioned, we had the Moto America contract, which was working all over the US, and we came out here in 2015. But the reason we chose Tampa and we chose Florida was, number one, we wanted to be on the East Coast so that we could go back to the UK fairly quickly and easily. Not because we wanted to escape, but, we were working across, multiple continents, and I was producing shows here and in the UK. The other reason is that obviously it's beautiful and sunny here, but also the Powerboat series we work for, the majority of their events happen in the sunshine, I'm happy to say, in Florida, and so it seemed to make sense to be in a place where the majority of our filming was going to be, so that's how we found our way to Tampa, Florida.
Now, technology comes up a lot in our conversations on the podcast, and obviously technology has changed over the years, and our industry is impacted by that every day. How has Greenlight Television changed with the technology advances, and how does it challenge your business?
You're right. I mean, it's a huge part of our business. It affects everything we do, and there's so many different ways that technology has affected us over the years. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them, which is a bit more unique to our business, I guess, is onboard cameras. So when we're filming motorcycles at 200 miles an hour, the only way to really get a sense of that speed is to be on the bike. And so we were the first company to put a camera on a bike with a quite cumbersome kind of system, and we put the recorder in the fairing, and that was about 20 years ago now. And obviously everyone's familiar with GoPro these days, but that's a huge change in our industry that's made our lives and everybody else's more more easy, I would say. But we've always tried to be early adopters of different formats. So we had one of the first Digibeta cameras when they came out, if anyone remembers those. We had one of the first Sony HD PMW 500s that was made. We adopted HD as soon as we possibly could, and now we don't buy any cameras that don't shoot 4K. And even though not a lot of broadcasters are currently taking 4K and it's quite cumbersome in terms of edit times, we always try and future-proof any equipment that we buy, because like the way I said earlier, we invest in people, we also invest in equipment, and we try to own a lot of our own equipment so that we have that available to us whenever we need it, and it makes us more competitive when we're quoting for different people. Another area is live. So Greenlight was the first company to ever produce a motorsport event live in HD, and we've done various live events with new versions of technology all over the world. So we produced live GT car racing from a volcano in Argentina. We did a 36 camera OB around Ceausescu's palace in Bucharest, and we've always tried to find a way where it seemed like something wasn't possible. And then I guess the last sort of big major change for me in terms of technology over the years is going from tape to file formats. And some days I do confess, I do say bring back tape, all is forgiven, because there's so many codecs and file formats these days, and then delivering online is great. It's fantastic to be able to deliver online, especially for our headquarters being based on an island. Sometimes there'd be weather and the flights wouldn't go, and we would rely on those flights to get a Digibeta tape to the BBC in London. So being able to deliver files digitally is fantastic, but of course that comes with its own new set of complications and difficulties, and codecs is just a small part of that. But it is great to see how that's evolved over the years.
I know exactly what you're saying, Lauren. Prior to this role, I spent a lot of time in post-production. And when the transition happened from tape to file, I remember people calling us up and saying, just send us a file of that. And we would say, what kind of file do you want? These specs or those specs and this file type and that file type? And of course, they thought they were making our life easier by saying, send us a file. And in reality, we just completely freaked them out by asking all these different questions because there were so many different file types to work with at that time.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's still a double-edged sword, but I do think it's better. And as the more that people talk about files in the UK, they've got a group that are trying to standardise things a little bit more, so that we don't have 57 different versions of a possible file that you can send out. And the more we can do that and streamline it, the better. But in terms of being able to move media around in this day and age, it is fantastic to be able to share media. We've got a portal, so for a lot of our clients we will build a digital portal so that, for example, if it's a championship, quite often the drivers, the sponsors, they all want their own little bit of footage. And if you think years ago, all of that had to be put on tapes and DVDs and even VHSs back in the day, and sometimes with timecode and sometimes without. And now you can just upload it to a portal and the client can download it and everybody's happy. So it is fantastic how the industry is developed, and I'm sure there's hundreds more developments to come.
Lauren, as a follow-up on the technology, how do you do your R&D? Because you mentioned a lot of your projects are motor sports, boat racing. It's not like you can go out and just find a race car and make sure your cameras are going to work. How do you practice without actually having a real event and making sure that your product is going to come out?
You're absolutely right. And a lot of R&D that we did back in the day was basically in the field, not in racing environment, because we didn't want anything to break or, God forbid, injure anybody. But we would quite often be putting cameras on bikes to just go out and ride them and see how they worked, and then come back in and things like, that you don't think of, like the vibrations. The first pictures we got back had huge vibrations on them from the bike, so we had to come up with a system to get rid of that. And so a lot of the R&D is in the field or as close to the field simulation as we can get, but we never really know until we try something that is going to work. I remember one project we did, which was not quite a TV project, more of a corporate one, but it was quite interesting. The client we were working for was a haulage company in the UK, a very big sort of well-known company, and they were actually taking some of their haulage off of the roads and onto the train tracks to be more environmentally friendly. Mm-hmm. And so when the first Eddie Stobbart was the name of the company, when the first Eddie Stobbart train left the middle of the UK, a place called Daventry, they wanted their big corporate clients, the head of the supermarket chain that was following this, to be able to see the train go up the country. And so at that time there was new RF links for helicopters that could be used, and the guy that I was hiring them from said, we think they will go quite far, but we would only guarantee that you'll be able to see the train for the first 5 miles as the helicopter follows it up the country. And the client signed off on the basis of that, but just with the hope that it would go further. And I think we got 50 miles away and we could still see the train. So that was quite exciting, sort of live testing something like that.
Whether it's a project we've already talked about or another one, what's your favorite project that you've been a part of and why?
Oh, that's a really good question, John, because there's so many different projects that I love for different reasons. I guess the project that stands out for me is probably the Northwest 200. I'm not involved in it now, obviously being based in Tampa, but that's a huge motorcycle race in Northern Ireland that I did mention briefly previously. But I worked on that for a number of years, and at the time a lot of the production was being done separately, so BBC crew were doing one thing and we were doing our thing for the BBC, and then they had another crew doing something else. And the idea was that I could come in and try and streamline that, and we could all sort of work together in a better way. And we were able to do that, but we were also able to produce live coverage on the Red Button and online. And then the same night there's programs going out, and it's just a real team effort. And I guess I really like working in a team. And so when that all came together, I was really proud to be part of that, I guess.
Lauren, you mentioned that you're based in Tampa, but how much travel do you do?
Well, within the U.S. quite a lot, especially in the summer months when sporting events that we cover are happening. It can be every weekend in June and July. It can be anywhere from just down the road in Sebring, or a race at Daytona Beach. That's our first jet ski race of the year. Or it might be a Trans Am race in Laguna Seca on the West Coast. So it's all over the U.S. And then I also, like I say, work on some of the European projects still. So last year we went out to the Monaco Historic Grand Prix. Every 2 years they have a historic race in Monaco on the same racetrack as the Formula One course. We cover that and do lots of VNRs and clips and social media and make some highlight shows. And we also do a live stream for Motor Trend on Demand. There's the highlight show go on Velocity in the US, and then it's also live on TV in the UK.
That's it for this episode of the Film Florida podcast. Thanks to Lauren Roberts for joining us, and thank you for listening. To learn more about Greenlight Television, visit greenlight.tv. That's greenlight.tv. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.